When Björn Ulvaeus wrote "The Winner Takes It All" in 1980, he poured his heart into every word. But what most people don't know is the cruel twist that came next. He made his ex-wife Agnetha sing those painful lyrics about their failed marriage. She called it one of the hardest moments of her life. Standing in that studio, singing her ex-husband's words about heartbreak and loss. But this wasn't even the worst part of their story. The real nightmare happened years before, and Björn kept quiet until now. Björn Ulvaeus was born on April 25, 1945, in Gothenburg, Sweden, right as World War II was ending. His parents, Ina and Eric, lived a simple life. Eric worked at a paper mill. Their apartment was small, with shared toilets, and Sweden was still under rationing until 1951. Even so, Björn was already humming melodies by age 5. He didn't have much, but he listened closely to radio songs and remembered every tune. Sweden's economy was growing fast, yet many families like his still struggled. Gothenburg was full of shipyards and heavy work, and it shaped how young Björn saw the world. He learned early what effort meant. In 1951, when Björn was 6, the family moved to a quiet coastal town called Faltskog. It was far from big cities. Winters were freezing. Life slowed down there. But in 1956, something changed. Björn got a small guitar from his cousin that Christmas. He was only 11, but he practiced for hours, copying songs he heard on the radio. He loved the raw sound of skiffle music, especially after hearing Rock Island Line in 1955. At night, he would be alone in his room, plucking strings and dreaming. Faltskog had only 20,000 people, but those long, quiet nights helped him fall in love with music. In 1957, at just 12, he built his own amplifier out of spare parts. He wasn't just playing, he was creating. But school was hard. Around 1952, he started at the local grammar school, and the teasing began. Björn wasn't into sports like most boys. While others played soccer, he listened to Elvis. He was shy and quiet, and that made him an easy target. By age 10, he was finding comfort in smuggled American rock records. Sweden barely had record players. Only 15% of homes owned one. But Björn found a way to listen. Rock Around the Clock played in his ears while classmates mocked him. The more they laughed, the more he escaped into music. He even tuned in to Radio Luxembourg late at night, hiding under his covers. By 1957, he had already started forming music groups in secret. He played at local fairs by 1958. Behind the pain, something powerful was growing. In 1957, Björn and his friends started a small band. They played folk and skiffle songs like Tom Dooley and performed at church events and town fairs. But he was terrified of being on stage. During one early show in 1958, he forgot the lyrics. People laughed. He couldn't breathe. The panic attacks were so bad, they followed him even into ABBA's fame years later. He once admitted he used beta blockers during ABBA tours in the 70s to calm his nerves. Still, he kept going. They practiced in a garage for hours every day. In 1960, they even won a local contest and took home 50 kroner. That was a huge moment for a boy who used to cry after school. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1963, when he was 18, Björn joined the West Bay Singers after winning a national radio contest. That same year, they changed their name to the Hootenanny Singers. They focused on Swedish folk music, not the British pop wave that was taking over. On October 26, 1963, they performed a song called Jag väntar vid min Mila on a TV show that was watched by millions. It was their first big break. By 1964, they had signed with Polar Music, and Björn was touring across Sweden in a beat-up van. That summer, they played 168 shows in parks and open fields. Their album, also called Hootenanny Singers, did well, despite competing with the Beatles and Stones. Their choice to sing in Swedish, not English, made them stand out. It was during this time that Björn met Benny Andersson, the man who would change his life forever. But while the music was growing, Björn was also trying to study business and law at Lund University. He enrolled in 1964, the same year their album came out. He barely attended class. By 1966, he was on academic probation. He was on the road all the time, performing in small towns, earning 500 kroner per show. He was living two lives, one in lecture halls, the other on smoky stages. He later admitted he remembers little of this period because of a memory condition revealed in 2009. Still, this chaotic time gave birth to his first big hit. In 1966, their song Gabrielle, based on a Russian tune, climbed to #1 in Sweden. It stayed on Svensktoppen for weeks and hit #5 on Kvällstoppen. But it sparked a controversy. Russian media accused them of stealing the song. Even so, it was released in 6 languages, including German and Finnish. It didn't chart overseas, but Björn was now a known name in Sweden. That same year, he and Benny Andersson started writing songs together. Their first attempt, Isn't It Easy to Say, was recorded by the Hep Stars, but failed to make it to Eurovision in 1969. Yet something powerful had started. Björn and Benny wrote together constantly. In 1968, they created Ljuva 60-tal, a cheeky song about the 60s, sung by Brita Borg. They often worked while traveling, sometimes even riding in cars during long road trips. Björn said their musical connection was like love at first sight. In 1969, they began recording their first album as a duo. It was called Lika, meaning happiness, and it came out in November 1970. Björn sang almost every track. It was deeply personal, full of acoustic guitar, and it hinted at the pop style they would later perfect with ABBA. They sold just 10,000 copies, but something was shifting. In the summer of 1969, while on tour, Björn met Agnetha Faltskog at a cafe. She was only 19, already famous for her 1967 hit, Jag var så kär. Björn was 24 and immediately drawn to her. They sang together on a song called To Live With You, their voices blending in a way that felt natural. She had just ended an engagement to a German producer, which made headlines. Soon, they were inseparable. They married on July 6, 1971, in a quiet church in Verum. Benny played the organ. Their daughter Linda was born in 1973. Their son Peter came in 1977. Even after their divorce in 1979, their music kept telling their story. The Winner Takes It All wasn't just a song, it was a goodbye. In 1970, the 4 future ABBA members took a free vacation to Cyprus. Björn, Benny, Agnetha, and Frida stayed at the Twiga Tower Hotel and performed a short show for UN troops. They sang mostly Swedish folk songs. It was the first time all 4 shared a stage. The 4 of them clicked, but their beginning was far from glamorous. They didn't even call themselves ABBA back then. The group name was a mouthful. Björn and Benny, Agnetha and Annie Frid, and their first single, People Need Love, came out in June 1972. In Sweden, it did okay, selling around 50,000 copies and climbing to number 17 on the charts. But outside Sweden, the song fell flat. Radio stations in the UK and the US ignored it completely. Critics mocked their sound, saying the harmonies felt too raw, the production too amateur, and the vibe too European. For a moment, it looked like the dream was over before it even started. They were juggling solo gigs just to stay afloat. Björn would later admit that the rejection cut deep, but instead of quitting, they doubled down. That failure in 1972 became the push they needed to sharpen every note. every word, every detail. By 1973, Björn was pushing hard for a name change. The long group name didn't stick in people's minds, and he came up with something simple: ABBA. It was just their initials, arranged into a neat little palindrome. Agnetha, Björn, Benny, Annie Fried. But in Sweden, that name already belonged to a canned fish company founded back in 1838. People laughed at the idea. A pop group named after herring? It sounded like a joke. The fish company wasn't thrilled either. They agreed to let the band use it, but only if they promised not to embarrass them. Newspapers ran contests where fans voted on the name, some making jokes about fishy music. The Swedish press wasn't kind either. Some said it sounded gimmicky, even ridiculous. But Björn held his ground. He ignored the mockery, got the trademark, and in the end, what sounded silly in 1973 became one of the most iconic names in music history. That same year, tensions exploded inside the studio during the recording of Ring Ring. Sessions started on January 10th at Metronome Studio in Stockholm. Björn took control of production, trying something new. He wanted to layer sounds like Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, tape speed tricks, multiple overdubs, raw textures no one in Sweden had tried before. But their manager Stig Andersson wasn't happy. He wanted clean, polished hits, not sonic experiments. Their arguments got so loud and bitter that Stig once stormed out of the studio, furious that Björn had rejected his lyrics, calling them too pompous. At one point, Björn threatened to quit if he wasn't given creative freedom. The whole project nearly fell apart. Yet when Ring Ring was finally released, it hit #1 in Sweden and sold 100,000 copies. It wasn't a global hit, but it proved that something was working. Still, the outside world wasn't convinced. In the spring of 1973, Björn flew to London with demo tapes in hand. He knocked on the doors of more than 10 labels: Decca, EMI, Polydor, Pi, WEA, and played them Ring Ring. Most executives smiled politely, then told him it was too European, too soft, too kitschy. One even laughed in his face, saying this kind of music would never sell outside Scandinavia. Not one deal came through. Björn returned to Sweden defeated, broke, and full of doubt. They were barely surviving on local shows, getting just 5,000 kroner per gig. The costumes, the accents, the upbeat melodies, everything about them was seen as a liability. Only one small deal came through in Australia, where Ring Ring reached number 32 in October. It wasn't much, but it kept the spark alive. And then came April 6, 1974, the Eurovision Song Contest in Brighton. The moment everything changed. They performed Waterloo in glittering outfits, with Björn wielding a silver star-shaped guitar that shimmered under the lights. There was even a last-minute scare. Sweden's conductor wore a Napoleon costume that almost malfunctioned on stage. But nothing could stop the energy. They won with 24 points, just 6 more than the UK's Olivia Newton-John. It was Sweden's first Eurovision victory, and it turned ABBA into overnight global stars. Strangely, that silver guitar vanished after the show and was never found again. Some say it could be worth millions today. By 1975, they were on the road constantly, touring through Scandinavia, playing outdoor parks, even in bad weather. The crowds grew wild. In Australia, SOS ruled the charts for 7 straight weeks, selling 500,000 copies. Mamma Mia was even bigger, hitting 1 million by the end of the year. But with fame came chaos. In Sydney, fans broke through hotel lobbies. Agnetha, overwhelmed by stalkers and threats, hid in her room. Her anxiety skyrocketed. The pressure almost crushed her. That same year, Björn negotiated their first real breakthrough in the US. Atlantic Records signed them in May 1976, after Waterloo caught the attention of the label's president. The US wasn't easy. Radio stations still thought their sound was too bubblegum. But Dancing Queen, released in 1976, changed that. It became their only #1 hit in America and topped charts in 15 countries. Frida cried the first time she heard the track. It was just that beautiful. They recorded it using Moog synthesizers and layered over 100 hours of overdubs. It nearly broke them from exhaustion. The album Arrival came out in October and sold 1 million copies in its first week. In 1977, they released the album, with songs like The Name of the Game, which Björn wrote after going through therapy. He used his real emotional struggles to shape the lyrics, revealing vulnerability ABBA had never shown before. They even staged a mini-musical called The Girl with the Golden Hair during their tour, with Agnetha and Frida wearing blonde wigs. Some audiences didn't get it at first, but over time, it became a key part of their storytelling. Then came their biggest tour yet, North America, fall of 1979. From New York to Vancouver, they played to packed arenas. Björn took the lead on Does Your Mother Know?, singing lines about turning down a younger admirer that caused quite a stir. It was the only tour they did in North America. It grossed what would be $10 million today, but behind the scenes, things were cracking. Björn and Agnetha's marriage was breaking down. By July that year, it ended in divorce. They had 2 children, Linda, born in 1973, and Peter in 1977. The split was messy. Björn wrote The Winner Takes It All in June 1980, pouring all his pain into the lyrics, and Agnetha had to sing it. She called it one of the hardest moments of her life. She stood in the studio, singing her ex-husband's words, lines about cold gods and rolling dice, and somehow, she made it beautiful. In November 1980, something strange happened. ABBA released an album called Super Trooper, right when everything in their personal lives was falling apart. Björn Ulvaeus wrote the title song as a way to deal with how exhausted he felt from performing over and over. He felt completely alone, even while on stage in front of thousands. You can hear it in the lyrics when he says, "I was sick and tired of everything." Behind the scenes, Björn's marriage with Agnetha Faltskog was already breaking down. There were whispers of affairs, emotional distance, and too many fights. Still, when Super Trooper came out, it exploded. It hit #1 in 9 countries. Just in the UK, it got over 1 million advance orders, which had never happened before. By the end of that year, it had sold 709,000 copies in the UK alone, making it the 4th best-selling single of 1980. The whole album passed 1.25 million UK sales. But even with all that success, something didn't feel right. The group's energy was breaking. Benny Andersson and Annie Fried Lyngstad were also having problems. Björn later said that the tiredness was turning into creative fights. The music was still happy, but the band itself was slowly falling apart. Then, in November 1981, they released another album called The Visitors. But this one felt completely different. It was darker, more serious. Björn's lyrics now talked openly about divorce, pain, and loneliness. By then, he and Agnetha had already divorced in July 1980. The songs One of Us and When All Is Said and Done sounded like letters to someone you once loved but couldn't stay with. There was also a strange sense of fear in the song The Visitors, cracking up, like someone watching over you. That fear made the Soviet Union ban the album in 1982. They didn't like what it suggested. The band had recorded the whole thing between March and November 1981 in Stockholm, but the studio didn't feel the same anymore. There were rumors of drinking, affairs, and fights. Frida's voice on the title track was so full of anxiety, you could almost feel her chest tightening. Still, the album sold over 2.2 million copies. In Germany alone, it hit 1 million. In the US, it reached number 29, even though it wasn't filled with ABBA's usual upbeat sound. And for the first time ever, an ABBA album was recorded digitally. Björn's songs sounded like someone saying goodbye. He was also watching Benny and Frida drift apart. And just like that, without any big announcement, The Visitors became their last studio album for the next 40 years. On December 11, 1982, something quietly ended. ABBA made what would become their final public performance on a British show called The Late Late Breakfast Show, live from Stockholm. Right after that, Björn told reporters that the band was going on a break. No one said it was permanent, but it felt permanent. By then, both couples were divorced. Björn and Agnetha in 1980, Benny and Frida in 1981. The band had run out of energy. Björn even said the studio didn't feel alive anymore. In 1983, they sold their Polar Music shares. They talked about getting back together in 1983 and 1984, but nothing ever happened. Their final single, The Day Before You Came, didn't do well in Sweden. It only reached number 11. Björn once said that if it had been a hit, they might have kept going. But they didn't. For the next 39 years, there was silence. In 2021, they came back with new music. But Benny made it clear. "This is it," he said. No more after this. What hurt most was that in 1982, they were still selling millions. But inside, they were just too tired to go on. 2 years later, in 1984, Björn and Benny began a new chapter. They teamed up with Tim Rice and created a musical called Chess, all about the Cold War. The music was complicated, dramatic, and full of tension. One song, One Night in Bangkok, became a huge hit. It reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was number 1 in Germany, Switzerland, and Australia. It sold over 1 million copies. Another song, I Know Him So Well, sung by Elaine Paige and Barbara Dickson, became the best-selling female duet in UK history. It sold 900,000 copies. The musical started as a concept album in 1984 and opened in London in 1986. It ran for 3 years. But when it moved to Broadway in 1988, things didn't go well. It only lasted 68 performances and lost $6 million. Björn later said that working on the musical reminded him of the tension he had felt during ABBA's final years. Still, Chess became a cult favorite later, especially among people who loved the game. In 2009, Björn helped open something personal, ABBA the Museum in Stockholm. It took years of planning. The original idea was to open in 2008, but it didn't happen because of money problems. When it finally opened on May 7, 2013, it became a place where fans could step into the world of ABBA. It had over 500 original items, costumes, gold records, even the real mixing desk from Polar Studios. Björn added personal touches, like a replica of the writing hut on Vigso Island. In just 5 years, 1.3 million people visited. The museum made over $10 million every year, just from ticket sales. Tickets cost 299 SEK, about $28. One of the most surprising parts was that fans could sing karaoke with holograms of ABBA. Björn said it was strange seeing a digital version of himself, like staring at a ghost. But the museum helped Stockholm's economy too, bringing in $50 million each year through tourism. In 1999, something unexpected happened. Björn co-created a musical called Mamma Mia, using 22 ABBA songs to tell the story of a young woman trying to find her father before her wedding. It opened in London on April 6, 1999, and sold out right away. No one expected it to be that big. Björn actually thought it would hurt ABBA's image, but it became a global phenomenon. By 2025, It had made over $4 billion. The 2008 movie version with Meryl Streep made $144 million. It was seen by 65 million people across 50 different productions and in 16 languages. The Broadway run from 2001 to 2015 brought in $624 million. In 2025, new revivals were making $1.78 million every week. Björn used his share of the money to invest in other things. Even though people called it a feel-good musical, some critics noticed something deeper. A lot of the show's emotion came from Björn's own pain, especially the divorces that shaped his life. In the 2000s, Björn started using his ABBA earnings more carefully. He was making around $2 to $3 million a year just from royalties. But after some bad investments in the 1980s, he had learned to be cautious. At one point, he had lost $1 million on a failed project. So now, he put his money into real estate and technology. He bought a $7 million home in Lidingö with solar panels and eco-friendly systems. He also got a $5 million penthouse in London for work. In 2007, he invested in Viaplay, a Swedish streaming service, just as digital music was taking off. ABBA songs were streamed 1 billion times a year on Spotify. He also supported green energy companies and joined a firm called Alm Equity in 2016 to help build eco-friendly homes. By 2023, his portfolio included a $2 million yacht and a Tesla Model S. He said it wasn't about luxury anymore. It was about living responsibly. Then came something deeply personal. In February 2022, after 41 years of marriage, Björn and his second wife, Lena, announced their divorce. They had 2 daughters together, Emma born in 1982 and Anna born in 1986. Björn later said he was struggling with loneliness. He went to therapy. It reminded him of his first divorce from Agnetha in 1980, which had inspired the song "The Winner Takes It All." But then something changed. In 2021, while promoting ABBA's Voyage, he met someone new. Her name was Christina Sass. She was 51. They got married on September 21, 2024, in Copenhagen. It was small and intimate, and surprisingly, comedian Sandy Toksvig officiated it. They connected quickly, especially over music and a shared love of travel. But not everyone reacted positively. The age gap of 28 years caused a stir. Some people were supportive, others weren't so kind. In January 2025, Björn gave an honest interview to The Times. He didn't shy away from the controversy. He said he had serious hesitations in the beginning. Not because of her, but because of how the world might react. He admitted he feared being judged, called a cliché, or worse. But still, he went forward. He said this wasn't just another relationship. It was the happiest he had ever been. He credited Christina with bringing a new kind of energy into his life, especially after his divorce. Their wedding was quiet, but filled with personal touches. Waterloo even played softly in the background. And Christina wasn't just anyone. She used to work with refugees before entering the corporate world. Now, they share a blended family and live a life that's both unusual and surprisingly grounded. By 2025, tabloids were still talking. Their honeymoon alone made headlines. It reportedly cost $2 million and took place in the Maldives. But what really shocked people came out in March 2025. That's when Björn spoke again. This time, he revealed something more personal. He said the age gap hadn't just been a public problem. It had been a private one, too. He had struggled, deeply. In 2023, he even went to therapy. He confessed he had serious insecurities about aging. He feared Christina would eventually leave him, but she didn't. She reassured him, and slowly those doubts faded. He talked about a cruise they took to Antarctica in 2024, calling it one of the most beautiful moments of his life. And in a moment that caught many off guard, he joked that his personal joy index used to hover around 60% in past marriages. Now, with Christina, he claimed it was at 95%. And then came the success. In the first year alone, the show made over $150 million. By 2025, it had sold 1.5 million tickets. In a 2023 TED Talk, Björn admitted it hadn't been easy. The technology broke down several times. Avatar glitches delayed the opening by months. But when it finally worked, it was more than just a concert. It was a revival. ABBA's music surged back into popularity, with Spotify streams rising by 85%. And for Björn personally, the project meant something more. In 2024, he said ABBA Voyage had emotionally saved him after his divorce. The show became a symbol of resilience, and now there are plans to take it to Las Vegas in 2026, with predictions that it might bring in another $100 million.